Imagine, if you will, the beating heart of America in the year 1923. The Great War was a fading nightmare, tucked safely into the history books. A fierce, relentless energy pulsed through the cities. The skirts were shorter, the music louder, and the belief in unending progress was a potent, intoxicating drug. It was the age of the automobile, the radio, and the flapper, a golden, dizzying sprint into modernity. But lurking beneath the dazzling facade of prosperity, beneath the shimmering veneer of the so-called Jazz Age, lay a profound civic hypocrisy. This was the year that America, by constitutional amendment, had declared itself dry. The noble experiment, Prohibition. A virtuous attempt to scrub the nation clean of the saloon's vice, promising to usher in an era of domestic tranquility and moral rectitude. What it actually ushered in was an era of unprecedented crime, defiance, and a complex network of shadows stretching from the docks of Boston to the alleys of Chicago. It was in the heart of this duality, this magnificent, reckless, and contradictory time that our story begins. Chapter 1: The Price of Silence. The setting is New York City. Not the gleaming Manhattan of millionaires and skyscrapers, but the smoky, labyrinthine streets of Greenwich Village, where the artistic ambition and the criminal underground overlapped with a kind of desperate elegance. Meet Elias Thorne. On the surface, Elias was the embodiment of that fading pre-war respectability, a man built for starched collars and predictable hours. He was, until very recently, a moderately successful lawyer whose greatest moral quandary had been deciding the appropriate vintage for a client's victory toast. His ambition had always been a quiet, steady thing, focused on building a legitimate life for his ailing mother and his younger, fiercely modern sister, Clara. But the 18th Amendment, Prohibition, didn't just shut down breweries and distilleries, it shut down Elias's clients. It dried up his contracts, and it quietly suffocated the respectable life he had known. The legal world had slowed to a crawl, paralyzed by the sudden, massive restructuring of business and society. Elias needed money, not for luxury, but for survival. Specifically, for the exorbitant medical bills for his mother, whose tuberculosis was consuming their savings like a wildfire. One frigid November evening, Elias found himself standing not on the marble steps of the courthouse, but in a damp, odorous alleyway behind a laundry service on Bleecker Street. He felt the cold not just in his hands, but deep in his conscience. He had traded his law books for a ledger and his conscience for a secret. His current occupation? Accountant to the invisible empire. A massive, armored man named Vito the Vice Moretti stood before him. Vito was not the elegant, sharp-suited mobster of later Hollywood myth. He was a blunt instrument of muscle and menace, draped in a cheap, heavy overcoat. "The books, Thorne," Vito grunted, his breath clouding the air. "Keep 'em clean. Make the numbers sing a pretty song for the taxman, but don't ever lie to me." Elias, gripping his leather briefcase like a shield, nodded stiffly. "The figures are precise, Mr. Moretti. The profit generated by the distribution network for the month of October is accurately reflected in the shell corporations we discussed. The import of olive oil and industrial solvents has never been cleaner on paper." He was a master of legal language, and now he was using that same precise language to construct elaborate financial fiction. This was his valuable yet dangerous skill. He understood loopholes, liability, and the lethal space between what was technically legal and what was profoundly wrong. It is crucial to understand that Prohibition didn't just enrich bootleggers, it built the foundation for modern American organized crime. Before 1920, criminal activity was decentralized. The sudden, immense profitability of illegal alcohol, a product that half the population craved, provided the massive capital needed to organize, bribe police, control unions, and establish the vast corporate structures we now associate with the Mafia. Men like Elias Thorne, the quiet professionals, were essential. They gave the brutal enterprise a respectable, almost corporate efficiency. Chapter 2: The Siren Call of the Rabbit Hole. Elias's primary contact point with Moretti's world was not the main operation, but the showpiece, the ultimate destination for the forbidden goods. It was the place where the money he calculated was spent, celebrated, and recycled. It was a speakeasy called the Rabbit Hole. To find it, you had to turn off the noisy main road onto a cobbled alley, pass a dark, legitimate-looking Chinese laundry, and find a small, unmarked steel door. A small slot would slide open. The required password for the current week, often a nonsensical phrase or a recent political joke, had to be whispered. Tonight's was, "The President needs a shave." Elias despised the place, yet he was drawn to it like a moth to a flame. He went there only for his weekly meeting with Isabella "Izzy" Rossi, Moretti's trusted lieutenant and the speakeasy's manager. Izzy was the true genius of the operation. She was not a flapper, but an architectural marvel of control and charisma. She was barely 26, dressed in sleek, dark silk that contrasted sharply with the gaudy opulence of the club. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, missed nothing, from the tilt of a fedora to the moment a customer's cash became too worn to pass off as legitimate. When Elias first met her, he saw only cold calculation. But Izzy was more. She had a kind of furious independence, a refusal to be defined by her gender or the era's expectations. In a world where men made the laws and broke them, Izzy controlled the nexus point. "Thorne," Izzy greeted him one night, not looking up from polishing a crystal glass that had no business being in a place so illegal. "The delivery of the Canadian blend is light again. 3 cases missing. Do the numbers account for the shrinkage, or do I need to ask Vito to ask the driver?" The implied threat was as clear and cold as the ice in the buckets. "The discrepancy is accounted for. I've registered it as a transportation fee adjustment. But Miss Rossi, if the shrinkage continues, the paper trail will become too visible. You are attracting too much attention." Izzy finally looked up, a faint, almost pitying smile touching her lips. "Attention, Elias? We sell attention here. We sell freedom. What do you think all these good citizens are paying $1 for a shot of rotgut whiskey for? They are paying to break the rules. They pay to feel like they are alive." Chapter 3. The Atmosphere of Defiance. Stepping into the rabbit hole was like falling down the rabbit's hole into a parallel universe, a world deliberately built to defy the official gray morality of the day. The club was subterranean, packed with velvet furniture and bathed in the amber glow of hidden lamps. The air was thick with smoke from Turkish cigarettes, thick with the scent of cheap perfume and expensive desperation, and thickest of all, with the intoxicating rhythm of jazz. The band was led by a magnificent, tireless pianist named Samuel Silas Green. Silas and his ensemble weren't just playing music, they were conducting an emotional riot. This was the era when jazz, considered by many moralists to be devil's music, exploded out of the South and into the nation's subconscious. It was improvisation, it was passion, and it was a refusal to follow the sheet music. Elias often watched the crowd from a shadowed corner near Izzy's office door. He saw judges, lawyers, his former colleagues, socialites, minor politicians, and even occasional beat cop, all rubbing shoulders, all united by their collective silent agreement to ignore the laws they were supposed to uphold. He saw his sister, Clara Thorne, too. Clara, 18, was everything Elias was not: vibrant, fearless, and utterly untroubled by moral gravity. She was a true flapper, her dark hair bobbed, her cheeks rouged, her long cigarette holder tapping impatiently to Silas's syncopated beat. She didn't drink the poisonous bootleg liquor, she was too sensible for that, but she lived for the energy of the forbidden. One evening, Clara saw him. She pushed through the tightly packed crowd, her beaded dress glittering under the dim lights. "Elias, you look like a ghost attending a party," she whispered, her voice bubbling with excitement. "What are you doing skulking back here? Is this where the lawyers come to forget they still have a job?" Elias felt a sharp pang of shame and fear. He couldn't tell her the truth, that he was here because his work was the reason this place, and others like it, existed. "I'm waiting for a colleague, Clara. Business," he murmured, attempting to sound bored. "You shouldn't be here. It's not safe." Clara laughed, a light, mocking sound. "Safe? Elias, the whole point of the 1920s is that nothing is safe. Everything is new, everything is dangerous, and everything is exhilarating. It's better than sitting in our parlor watching Mother waste away, isn't it?" Her words, though innocent, were a devastating indictment of his respectable life. She knew his motivations, even if she didn't know the dark means he was employing. He was trying to save their mother, but he was losing his soul in the process. Chapter 4. The Anatomy of the Illegal Drink. The true secret of the speakeasy was not the atmosphere, but the product itself.
the drink. The liquor served in the rabbit hole was famously known as the Deacon's Delight. Most of it was simply industrial alcohol, like the solvents Elias wrote about in his ledgers, that had been redistilled and cut with water, coloring, and sometimes lethal additives to give it a kick. In the early years of Prohibition, the quality of illegal liquor, or rotgut, was often lethal. The government, in a tragically misguided effort to enforce the law, mandated the denaturation of industrial alcohol, adding toxic chemicals to make it undrinkable. Desperate bootleggers, however, hired chemists to renature it. This process was sloppy and often left behind highly toxic elements like methanol, which caused blindness, paralysis, and death. It is estimated that thousands of Americans died or were permanently disabled due to poisonous alcohol during this era. Elias saw the consequences firsthand. One night, a wealthy socialite, red-faced and staggering, collapsed on the dance floor. His body was stiffening, his eyes wide and vacant. Izzy, with chilling efficiency, had two bouncers remove the man through a back stairwell designed specifically for this purpose. Elias approached Izzy, his voice strained. That wasn't just drunk, Izzy. That was methanol poisoning. You have to tell Moretti to find a cleaner source. Izzy poured herself a clear glass of gin, which he only sipped, never drank, and sighed. Vito knows the risk, Elias. Everyone knows the risk. But the cheaper the cut, the higher the profit margin. That man was wealthy. He could afford the risk of a hangover or the risk of death. That is the agreement you make when you knock on the door and whisper the password. She leaned closer, her eyes glittering. You and I, Elias, we are the architects of this trade. I manage the demand and the distribution. You manage the money, the lifeblood. If we start questioning the quality, we stop making the profit that keeps you paying your mother's doctors. Is that clear? Elias swallowed hard. The money. Always the money. He was an accomplice for murder for the sake of survival. The whisper of the speakeasy was the whisper of a dying conscience. Chapter 5. The Accountant's Crisis. The tension between Elias's old life and his new one reached a breaking point one Sunday morning. He was sitting in his dimly lit office, going over the accounts. He had just finished calculating the immense profit generated by the sale of the Deacon's Delight, enough money to keep his mother alive for another 6 months, perhaps a year. A knock came at the door. It was Detective Thomas Riley, a well-known, incorruptible officer from the local precinct, who had been a client and a friend of Elias's late father. Riley was one of the few honest men left, and his mission was to uphold the law, including Prohibition. Riley didn't mince words. Elias, I need to know what you're doing. Elias stood up, adjusting his tie. I'm running an accounting service, Detective. I have several new clients in the import-export sector. Import-export, Riley repeated, flatly. You used to draft wills and represent honest shopkeepers. Now you're driving a new Pierce Arrow and paying your mother's bills with cash you never had before. Riley placed a photograph on Elias's desk. It was a clear, grainy picture of Elias, his briefcase visible, walking away from the Bleecker Street alleyway. I know about the laundry, Elias. I know about Moretti. I know about the speakeasy. Riley leaned across the desk, his face etched with disappointment. Elias, you're too good, too intelligent for this. You're keeping the books for the people killing the poor of this city with poison alcohol. They'll chew you up and spit out the husk. Tell me what you know, and I can give you protection, a chance to get clean. Elias looked at the picture. He saw the shadow he had become. But then he thought of his mother's pale face, the rhythmic rasp of her breathing, the doctor's demand for the next month's retainer. He picked up the picture and slowly tore it in half. Detective, I am afraid I have no idea what you are referring to. I suggest, for your own sake, you leave my property immediately. Riley stared at him. The loss in his eyes was more painful than any threat. He had failed to save his friend's son. As Riley left, Elias felt a terrible triumph. He had successfully lied to the last honest man he knew. He was officially and irrevocably in the system. He was a cog, but a valuable one. He looked at the ledger, the precise, clean numbers charting the flow of dirty money. He was keeping his family alive, but he had entered a game where the currency was not dollars, but morality. The whisper of the speakeasy became a deafening roar in Elias Thorne's mind. He had his money, his stability, but the price was paid in silence and complicity. His new life had begun. The foundations of the Gilded Shadow were set, built on bootleg gin and balanced on a lie.